Hello, friends. It is I, Vince, and this is another episode of The RR Show. Very excited for this because it is all spooky stories. Got to give a hat tip to our friends over at Disturbed. It's another great podcast. They do a lot of great spooky stuff, and you can find them just by going to your favorite podcast platform like I am on right now. Go to Disturbed True Horror Stories. Another great podcast. So let's jump into the spooky files. On this episode of The RR Show, get ready to be creeped out. It begins right now. Or does it? Actually, it does. Hang on. Our first story comes from r/TrueScaryStories, posted by user HeightAcrobatic1066. Stranger at the door. When my brother and I were around 12 years old, like 2006, we were at my dad and stepmom's house in the afternoon, probably around 3 p.m., so still broad daylight. My brother and I were the only two people home because my dad, stepmom, and younger siblings were in a nearby town for their youth soccer game. The two of us were lounging in my dad's room, which was located at the back of the house, and watching a movie when we heard a knock at the front door. My brother and I grew up with our single mom and were latchkey kids. So being home alone and having people stop by wasn't concerning or weird to us, especially back in those days where it was more common for friends to drop by your house to see if you were home, since not every kid had a cell phone to get in touch. But on this day, we were at my dad's house, like I said, and didn't know anyone in the neighborhood. So the knock at the door was weird since none of our friends or relatives lived nearby to come over randomly. Both of us wanted to ignore the knocking and wait for the person to go away. But being latchkey kids in a house where it wasn't normal for people to stop by unexpectedly, my instinct was to go make sure the door was locked. We sure as hell knew better than to go and make our presence known, and damn sure we weren't going to open the door. But in my mind, there was no getting around one of us going to make sure nothing was unlocked. I knew my brother and could tell that he wasn't going to do it, so I volunteered because it was an overwhelming priority. I got up and stealthily creeped down the hallway, leading from my dad's room to the front door. There was a window next to the door, so I crouched around and very carefully peeked between the blinds before reaching out and twisting the door lock as silently as I could. It was unlocked. So I'm so damn glad I went to check. When I peeked out the window, I saw a middle-aged man, slim and tall, but not huge, and bald on the top with some short salt and pepper hair wrapping around the sides of his head. He had his hands behind his back. I can't recall if it was one hand or both, and in one of his hands was a metal object that I took for a knife. But to this day, I can't say for sure what he was holding. He did not see me looking at him through the window, or if he did, he at least didn't look at me and let me know that he knew I was there. And the way the house was designed, the front door was invisible from the street because there were bushes and tall trees blocking it. My 12-year-old heart sank knowing this random guy was at the door with what I think or thought was a knife behind his back, or at the very least, a metal object that he felt was necessary to put behind his back. It was especially terrifying because I recognized it was actually not super unrealistic, since the man would not be visible from the street and therefore could hide something behind his back without worrying about neighbors or cars passing by and seeing him. This house would be a good target for someone to do bad stuff, since you'd be shielded from being seen. At this point, normal paranoia became full-on fight-or-flight panic mode. It was like a switch was flipped on from the "let me just go make sure the door is locked" to "I think there's a guy with a knife at the door." I creeped back to my dad's room and told my brother what I'd seen. He grabbed the house phone. I can't remember if there was one in my dad's room or if he had to go to another room. But before long, he was speaking with my dad on the phone. my dad immediately instructed us to let his Rhodesian Ridgeback buddy in from the backyard. Let me tell you, in a situation of pure terror, having a big, loud dog was the only bit of hope or relief. But without Buddy there, I don't even want to imagine sitting in that feeling of terror without any hope of someone or something to save you as a child, or at least give you a sense of having a chance. From there, my brother and I locked ourselves in a bathroom by the front door. Not sure why we decided to hide in the closet room to the guy outside. From inside the bathroom, we called 911 while my brother clutched a kitchen knife. Both of us ugly crying and struggling to get words out to the operator. While in the bathroom, I swear on my life that I heard the front door handle being twisted around, which would have meant the guy was now trying to enter the house. The bathroom was like 7 feet from the front door, so I feel like I know what I heard. I don't know. How could I confuse such a specific sound? So I trust that it was what I thought it was. I have such a vivid memory of huddling in that bathroom, feeling truly helpless and out of control of what might happen next, with the only comfort of being the noise of Buddy barking at the front door, and knowing that if the guy decided to kick the door down, he'd have to deal with a big dog and then have a knife fight with 2 kids. Needless to say, I was really hoping Buddy would hold it down for us because I didn't like our odds if the man at the door got past Buddy. Before long, the cops arrived, and shortly after, my dad and stepmom got home too, apparently having jumped in her maroon minivan and doing like 100 miles an hour to make the 15-mile drive back home after we called. The guy was gone back then, and nothing ever came of it. To this day, my dad's theories that the guy at the door was his neighbor coming over to complain because apparently Buddy would always bark at the neighbor while he was doing yard work. So my dad thinks the neighbor was trimming bushes and therefore just happened to have clippers or something in his hands when he came over to complain. Sounds reasonable enough, but I wish I had asked at the time to see the neighbor because then I could for sure identify him and know what the situation was. Personally, I'm open to my dad's theory, but it always seemed to me that my dad clung to it more for his own comfort, since the alternative would be a parent's nightmare. If it were the neighbor, though, some things don't make sense. Like the guy conveniently showing up when no cars were in my dad's driveway since they left to go to the soccer game like 20 minutes prior. Seems like coming over when it appeared nobody was home would be a weird time to expect your neighbor to answer the door. Or the guy trying to twist the handle like I'm pretty damn sure I heard, not a very neighborly act, trying to enter someone else's home when they're gone. Either way, whether the threat was real or imagined by my brother and I, our experience was as real as it gets. What I learned is that sometimes perception really is reality, at least in your own mind. Like the feeling of thinking we were living a nightmare was authentic and visceral because we believed we were living a nightmare. What the explanation was, I can't say for sure, and it bothers me so much that I'll never know with certainty if we were that close to whatever knows what. No clue why my dad never followed up with that neighbor, but looking back, it seems pretty clear that the adults wrote it off as the product of kids' imagination. In this creepy episode, our next story is posted by user LuckyButterfly800 under the subreddit r/CreepyEncounters. Scary Uber Experience. This happened a couple of months ago. I was at a friend's house one night and didn't realize how late it was, around 2 a.m. I loved sleeping in my own bed, so I decided to call an Uber home instead of staying over. My friend lives in a more rural area of town, so it took a while to get an Uber, and it was around a 40-minute drive back to my house. Upon getting into the Uber, the first comment he made was telling me how pretty I was. Immediately, red flags started going off in my head. I'm already a very anxious person and have always been afraid of taking Ubers alone, especially at night, So I was already on edge before the comment was made. I just replied, "Thank you," and he started to drive me home. My friend was a boy, and I assumed the Uber saw him standing at the doorway before we left, because around 5 minutes into the drive, he asked, "Was that your boyfriend?" At this point, my gut feeling tells me something is wrong. I reply yes and say nothing further. He then proceeded to go on about how lucky my boyfriend was and how pretty I was. At this point, I didn't answer. Around 10 minutes into the drive, the Uber driver tells me that he knows a quicker way to get to my house, and we're going to take a detour. I immediately start to panic inside because, as an anxious Uber rider, I consistently watch the Uber app on the driver's phone and need to be following the map. Also, this detour seemed to be going deeper down rural roads versus into the city. I then called my dad because it was past 3 a.m. and at this point he didn't answer the phone. I then decided to call 911. The operator answers me right away, and I act like I'm talking to my dad on the phone. She immediately sensed that I was unable to tell her the exact situation, but I acted like I was telling my dad that I was in an Uber and would be home soon. She then started to ask me questions about the color of the car by having me simply answer yes or no, the make of the car, my location, etc. She asked if I was in danger, and I said I don't know. After telling her my location, she then told me to tell the Uber driver to get on the highway because the detour he had taken consisted of more rural roads. Thankfully, we were only around 5 minutes from the highway and another 10 minutes to the police station. She told me to tell the Uber driver to drop me off at a house in a neighborhood close to the police station. She gave me an exact address and advised that an officer would be waiting there for me to take me home. After politely trying to beg the Uber driver to change addresses, he finally did and continued to go in that direction. I stayed on the phone with the operator until I got to the destination. Sure enough, an officer was waiting a couple of houses down. I got out of the Uber and walked straight towards the car. I'm not sure if I was overreacting about the situation due to my anxiety, especially by calling 911, but the alarms were going off so loud in my head that I genuinely thought I needed to in that situation. I now only take Uber alone in the daytime and always share my ride with my parents or my friends. Stay safe, everyone. Our final story in this episode comes from the subreddit r/TheTruthIsHere from user ComfyDW. I ran into myself in the future, then the past. So this has had me tripping out for the last few days. It all started with me at 19. I used to go on a run down this long open road in northeast Tennessee that was pretty open with only fields on the side and barely any houses. I would run this same route every single day as I was really training hard before joining the Army. One day, I planned on taking it off, but I had this weird feel of motivation to go on the run that was sitting with me nearly all day. I chalked it up to only being as that. Motivation. So it is now 3 p.m., which is a lot later than my normal runs, which were usually either around 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. I'm running about 3 miles in, and I look down at my phone to change the song, and out of nowhere, I run into someone. The man, who was the same height as me, he had this long beard and a pretty large stature, was on the ground, and I help him up. I say, "My bad, sir, I didn't see anyone else around here." He says, "All good," then looks up to me, and it looked like he had just seen a ghost. I have never seen fear like this in someone, unless I was playing scare pranks on someone. He had just a wide mouth and eyes looking at me as he got up, as he stuck his hand out. I didn't know what he was doing, and he said, "Just take care. Sorry again." He just had a wide mouth and eyes looking at me as he got up, and he stuck his hand out. I didn't know what he was doing and said, "Take care, sorry again." Fast forward around 10 years later, I have been in the Army now for 6 years. I have a religious exemption to grow my beard. I began actually lifting weights a lot more, feeling well, doing well. Holiday block leave comes around, and I got the feeling that I really should go back home to visit my family, as I hadn't actually gone back since 2019, because flying out of Hawaii was just, let's say, expensive. And back then, I was a poor private. Now I'm stationed closer to home, and a sergeant with some money. I flew into East Tennessee and am staying at a hotel. On the third day, it's nice out, and the air smells nostalgic, as it's the start of fall season. And I kept thinking about the old home I stayed in with my parents about 30 minutes away, which my mom's ex-boyfriend still lives in. So it's around noon. I had dinner and decided to go visit and see how he and his kids are doing all these years later. I go and sit and talk with them all for a while, and we drink a couple of beers for the hell of it. I then decided I want to go and check out my old running route. No idea why I thought to do this, but oh well, might as well. I tell him I'm going to walk my old running route as it was nostalgic, and I feel it did very well for me and my future Army career as a young adult. I'm walking, and it's dead silent. Slight wind out and just beautiful fields all around me. All of a sudden, I felt like I just got tackled out of nowhere. There was no one in sight as far as I had known. Then I hear, "My bad, sir, I didn't see anyone else around here." I'm looking at the ground for my phone, which had fallen out of my hand, and I say, "All good." That's when I looked up to the kid and immediately felt like the world turned upside down. Almost like a panic attack was taking over me. Nothing feels real. I notice the kid. It was literally me. I tried to speak, but my mouth had gone so dry I just couldn't say anything. So I reached out and weirdly just wanting to touch my younger self. He looked at my hand, smiled, and said, "Take care, sorry again," put his headphone back in and took off running. I stood there for only like 3 seconds to piece my brain back together, and then I yelled, "Joe, come back," and went running to catch up to him but could never see him again. Yet, this is an open road. He couldn't have gotten too far but was vanished. This has been sitting with me ever since, a few days ago, as though it's some kind of weird dream, and I can't get over it. Has this happened with anybody else? Please tell me I'm not crazy. So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.